Good afternoon, everybody. Wanting to get started, thank you very much for joining us. Anybody else that can obviously watch this on catch up or will be joining us shortly. Emma is one of our isologists at Blackmores, so she'll be here to talk to you about TISAX, but I wanted to introduce her just before we get started. Want to move the slide forward for me?
Yeah, sure.
And just by way of introduction, we just got a little bit of information about Blackmores if you've not heard of us before. We've been working in ISO standards for 20 years, just past 20-year mark. This is a celebration year for us. As well as that 20 years, we're also working about 20 different standards, those covering the areas of quality, risk and sustainability, and I'll go over a few of those in a moment. And it's led us down this path of introducing TISAX as well, because it's very closely related to 27,001 family of standards, specifically for an industry. So we've worked with over 600 companies worldwide, pretty much, with a 100% success rate, which is very nice to have, and a 100% NPS score as well the last couple of years. So we've, as industry leaders in our field of ISO, we decided that TISAX would be another service that we'd add for our clients, and for those of you that wanted to learn a little bit more about it, that's why we're here today.
Next slide, yeah.
Please, yeah. So, as I said, under the quality, risk and sustainability, here's the standards that we cover. Most recently, I guess the IAI standard 42001 has been on the sort of up from 2025, 2026, and we're seeing a lot more engagement in that area. This is also with the built environment. That's another one that's gained some traction in recent years. And TISAX being related to 27,001 and being a requirement, we think, in the sort of contractual area, rather than other legal area. This is why we sort of added this to our list of standards this year. Every ISO standard that we implement comes in the form of our 7 steps, which is our approach to deliver any ISO standard, and it's called Isology. Together with Steph, who's on the call today, she runs all of our digital marketing, and the ISO podcast, the ISO show, is, one of the big things that we offer as a free of charge thing. You can find that anywhere on any of the major podcasts where you'd ever get your podcast, whether that's, Amazon, Spotify, Libsyn, whatever. You can find that there. Lots of interesting stuff in relation to all the different standards that we cover. We're consistently high rated in our profession, and all of our auditors work for us. They're lead auditors in the standards that they implement, and Auto IRCA standards, which is one of the big things of CPD for us as a business. Next, please. The Isology Hub is our online platform. So as well as the consultants that work for us, there's also a training platform that we have where you can find lots of different templates, processes. There's game plans on there, coffee break training for specific elements in relation to any of the standards that we cover. There are full roadmaps on there to implement the ISO standard 14,001 and anything that we've covered in terms of transition in the last year. 27,001's been on there, and we will more than likely be updating that for the upcoming changes to 9,001 and ISO 14,001 this year and next year.
Okay.
Carry on. Yeah. So today, this is what we'll be covering. I'll hand over to Emma very shortly. But this is what's TISAX, and your first steps towards towards this TISAX assessment, how long it would take to achieve that, some insights, how to complete the self-assessment, and some Q&A, which we are more than happy to take. Okay, so Emma, I'll hand that over to you now.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. Right, so bear with me while I just set myself up. Right, okay, so let's start with what is TISAX. So TISAX stands for Trusted Information Security Assessment Exchange, and it was developed by the automotive industry, by the VDA, and it's managed by the ENX Association. So you'll hear those names quite regularly. It's a standardized framework for assessing and sharing information security results between manufacturers and suppliers. And just for your information, the end of February 2026, ENX confirmed that over 20,000 locations are now TISAX compliant across the world. That's over 90 countries. So it started in Germany, it's expanded over to 90 countries now. So a little bit more about the characteristics, of TISAX. So it's an automotive industry standard only. So no other industry is involved, just the automotive industry. Based on VDA Information Security Assessment Catalogue. So it's built on the ISO 27001 Annex A controls. So if you know your 27001, there are 93 controls under there, and TISAX is based on them. There are some differences, but very much it follows the same line. TISAX is an assessment, so there's no certification. So the results, when you've achieved them, are labels that are captured on the ENX portal, and that's what you have instead of certificates. When you do become compliant, it's valid for 3 years. So there's no surveillance audit needed that ISO will lead. However, we do recommend internal audits just to keep yourself on track each year. And it focuses on protecting the OEM sensitive data prototypes. And again, it's globally recognised now. So it was mainly just in Germany, but now it's expanded across the world. So why is TISAX important? So it gives the automotive industry a trusted, standardised way to ensure information security across the entire supply chain. Basically, instead of everyone doing their own thing, it's standardised, so everyone follows the same. It supports compliance with data protection laws, so it avoids penalties, and it enables access to new business. And as an advantage as well, many OEMs and suppliers now actually request and require TISAX. Who is TISAX applicable to? So various different places. So you've got automotive suppliers, so tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Any companies providing parts, software, engineering or services to automotive manufacturers. There are service providers working with the OEMs, so the original equipment manufacturer, and that can be IT providers, cloud services, testing labs, design agencies, logistics partners, etc. Companies handling prototypes or confidential development data. So this includes design studios, engineering consultancies, testing facilities, and R&D partners. And organisations processing personal data for automotive clients, so call centres, HR service providers, telematics providers, fleet management platforms. So what are the benefits of TISAX? So TISAX provides access to the European market without the need for country or manufacturer-specific security credentials. And there's also effective prototypes protection. So prototype protection addresses security requirements for handling pre-production vehicle designs, technologies, and confidential development data. Brand reputation. TISAX standards serves as visible proof of information security maturity. So that's providing credibility in competitive bids, because as I said, you are now expected to have TISAX. And audit fatigue solution. So there's less auditing results This is due to one comprehensive assessment satisfying all participating manufacturers all at once. So instead of lots of different audits that you may have elsewhere, this is just one that goes through for everybody. It also reduces costs as well. So we've mentioned ISO 27001, so let's have a little look at how the differences are, what the differences are. So first of all, industry focus. So 27001 is applicable to all industries, any industry, whereas TISAX is only for the automotive industry. 27001 is the standard by ISO, whereas TISAX is developed by VDA and managed by the ENX Association. 27001 is a formal accredited certification. That's a public certificate, that you can use in marketing, you can share, you can do quite a lot with. Whereas TISAX is a TISAX label that is shared privately only on the ENX platform only. The scope definition, so the organisation defines the scope for 27001, whereas TISAX, the scope is location-based and it's tied to assessment objectives, both of which we'll have a look shortly. The audit frequency, so 27001, you will do your stage 1, your stage 2, and then you'll have your surveillance audits annually, and you'll have a recertification every 3 years. Whereas TISAX is valid for 3 years. You don't need to do any more audits other than every 3 years. However, again, I do recommend internal audits just to check you're on track. And then the assessment objectives. So there are the ISMS general controls, whereas TISAX, you actually choose which categories you're covering. So that could be prototype protection, data protection, or information security. And you can have a mixture. You don't have to have one, you can have a mixture of them. So just to confirm with TISAX versus 27001, so 27001 is a certificate, whereas TISAX is an assessment with labels. What does TISAX actually add to ISO 27001? So when you look at the differences, there is a little bit more with TISAX. So there's a lot more in terms of suppliers and assets to 27001, but you've also got the 3 areas. So you've got the prototype protection, the data protection, and the information security. So there's a little bit more in depth. If you have ISO 27001, you're already around about 70 to 80% compliant. And that just depends on your self-assessment though. So let's have a look at the process, what we're looking at to actually have TISAX. So first of all, you've got preparation. So that is where you are looking into what TISAX requirements are, what the request is as well. So you will probably be likely asked to have TISAX, which is where most people come to TISAX. They're asked to have TISAX to be able to bid for some work. The second part is registration and self-assessment. So you need to register yourself on the ENX portal. You'll need to select your scope, your objectives, select an auditor provider, complete the self-assessment and complete some internal audits. In terms of the assessment itself, so number 3, if you're doing level 2 and 3, you'll have an audit. First of all, they'll do an offline review. And then they'll come together with you and go through the actual audit. They'll discuss their findings and they'll produce a report. And it depends where you go from here. So it depends on your results. So you may go straight to number 6, which is you're compliant and you exchange your results straight away with the report on the ENX, sharing your results and the labels are issued. However, if you do end up having some non-conformities, you do have to go through the corrective action. Number 4 on here, which is where you need to create a corrective action, you need to define what you're going to be doing, etc. The auditor needs to approve that. You need to do the actions, and then you do a follow-up with your auditor to check that everything's been completed. So how does TISAX work? So again, no certification. You'll receive labels. We will discuss labels in a second. The ENX portal on the website is the key place to go. So that's where you'll get all the information you need. So you register there for the TISAX assessments. You will select your accredited auditor provider. You undergo and manage your assessments. That's where you'll securely exchange the results and TISAX labels with partners and clients. It's also where the latest information and documentation is for TISAX. So we'll give you all the updates there. That's a really good place to go. There is a TISAX handbook. It's just a little heads up with the TISAX handbook. It's very long. It's about 154-ish pages. It's a little bit all over the place. I'm actually working on one myself, to be honest, because make it a little bit easier to read. But yeah, do download it, but you'll find that a theme is in different places of the handbook. And of course, the self-assessment document is what you'll need, and that is free if you download that. So we mentioned labels before. So what are labels? So you've got temporary labels and permanent labels. You're obviously working towards permanent labels. So the temporary labels, they're issued if no non-conformities after initial audit phase. They do signal progress towards compliance, and some clients will actually accept temporary labels. They will be replaced when the full audit has been completed. So you may be issued these just while you might have a couple of bits that you need to finish off. So you might be given temporary labels. Permanent labels, this means you're compliant. That's what's valid for 3 years. It's fully recognised on the ENX portal, sorry, the platform. And this is what can be shared with the OEMs, suppliers and partners, and it is required for the formal compliance with TISAX expectations. So we're going to go into data sensitive levels. So there are 3 levels that you're considering, you may be asked to cover. So we'll just talk about what these are. So the classification of data is what drives the entire TISAX framework. If you get the classification wrong, you risk either under protecting sensitive assets or over engineering controls when they're not needed. So the first one is low sensitivity. So this covers information that is either publicly available or can be shared broadly within the business without risk. If this information was leaked, it's likely there would be no meaningful business or legal consequences. And most organisations will have large volumes of data in this category, and it requires no special protection measures under TISAX. Moderate sensitivity, so the middle one there, this is where the majority of automotive supplier relationships sit. So this is a level 2, which is what most people do take. So access should be restricted to authorised personnel, and proper controls put in place. And then the last one is high sensitivity, so confidential data, the most critical tier. So it covers data where breach could cause severe or potential irreversible harm, and it includes personal data subject to GDPR. So companies handling this type of data face the strictest controls and the highest level of TISAX assessment. And if you do have a breach here, it could mean fines, loss of OEM contracts, and maybe damage to your reputation. So if you look into what that actually the requirements from TISAX for each of those levels. So level 1 is AL1. So you'll come across AL1, which is level 1, and that is the self-assessment only. So this applies to companies that handle only low sensitive data and have no meaningful access to OEM confidential information. The process is light. It's a lightweight process. So AL1 is the entry point, and it's the lowest bar to clear. It's just the self-assessment questionnaire only that's completed through the ENX portal with no external auditors involved. And that could be people like catering companies serving an OEM head office, or a branded merchandise supplier. So they are inside the supply chain, but they don't actually touch anything sensitive. So there's no risk, or very, very little risk. So AL2, assessment level 2, remote access, is the moderate sensitivity, and it's the most common level in the automotive supply chain. and it applies to companies that regularly handle moderately sensitive OEM data. So that could be engineering documents, contracts, supplier pricing. The assessment is conducted remotely by an E&X accredited auditor who will review your evidence and then offline, and they'll come online with you to go through that evidence and also conduct interviews with key personnel. So this could be tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, IT vendors, and engineering consultancies with access to development data. They typically fall under level 2. So level 3, that is the on-site assessment. So this is the one with the highly sensitive data, and it's the most demanding level, and it's reserved for companies handling the most critical data. It requires a full on-site audit by an E&X accredited assessor. The assessor will visit your facilities, inspect physical and digital security controls, and conduct an in-depth interviews. So companies in this category include prototype manufacturers, R&D partners on next generation platforms, and cyber security firms embedded deep within the OEM systems. A failed AL3, or level 3 as we call it, assessment could result in suspension from the E&X portal and loss of OEM contracts. These levels are not normally self-selected. It's normally determined by the data you handle and confirmed by the OEM. But if you're unsure which level that applies, then just have a little think about what kind of data you handle. Just a quick drink. So taking your first steps towards TISAX. So let's have a little look what steps you can take to get going. The first step is preparation and registration. So that's when you need to register on the E&X portal. There is a fee. It's a 400 and something euros. I didn't capture it, unfortunately. I think it's 440, but it's around about £500. And that's when on your E&X portal you create an account. And that's then where you will need to define the scope of your certification. And that's when you'll select your assessment levels, locations, and it's all based on your customer data sensitivity. Then you will conduct your self-assessment. And you'll conduct an internal self-assessment using the VDA catalogue that you can download. This will show you the gaps that you'll need to review and action. Then you have your gap remediation. So that is addressing those gaps from your self-assessment. If you have ISO 27001 already, this actually will be a less task, shorter task, because you're not starting the ISMS, so the Information Security Management System, from scratch. You already have the bases there already. You're just building on top of what you already have. Step 4 is the actual assessment. So that is with level 2 and level 3 when you have your auditor. That's when you engage with the E&X accredited auditor, and they will conduct the formal TISAX assessment. If you have 27001, it's comparable to the ISO certification assessments. So the big question is, how long will it take to achieve TISAX? So when we look at the time, this is sort of what we're thinking about, really. That's through myself experiencing it, doing TISAX and also helping clients. It does depend on lots of criteria. It depends on how many subjects you're covering. It depends on the levels that you're choosing. It depends if you have 27001 in place already. So I'll just talk through each one. So level 1, you're only doing the self-assessment, but not many people will accept level 1 because you don't get labels with that one. But you still would need to do the self-assessment. You'll still need to embed your policies and procedures. And you're looking at roughly 3 months if you have 27001 in place already, but 3 to 6 months if you do not have 27001 in place already. Level 2, again, you're looking at 3 to 6 months if you have 27001, and 6 to 12 months. And that is when you'll still do the self-assessment, and it's a remote audit, at which they will ask you lots of questions, etc. And then you'll do some extra work on that. Again, if you do not have 27001, you're starting the ISMS from scratch. So that's where the time comes from. And also you need to have maturity level 3 to pass, which I'm going to show you in a second. So that's for level 2. And level 3, it's a lot more in depth. It's very thorough. They're coming on site to do audits. There's a lot to be done. You're looking at least 6 to 9 months if you have 27001 in place already. And if you don't have 27001, you're looking at least 9 months plus. But again, this is on one subject area. So if you imagine if you put another subject area, you might need a bit more time. Most clients expect at least level 2. So that's probably the most common is level 2 there. And just putting that into a timeline there. So you're looking at the preparation and self-assessment can be about 2 to 4 weeks. The implementation is about 6 to 12 weeks, and the assessment at the end with the auditor could be 2 to 4 weeks. And then that's up to the audit. It depends on your results, obviously how long it takes after then if you get any non-conformities. So let's look at some key audit insights for TISAX, just a little bit more in depth into what is required. So what needs to be included within the TISAX scope? So first of all, the scope description. So this is what your organisation does in relation to information security. So it's your business activities, the services you provide, the types of data you handle. Locations. Now, this is quite key for TISAX. You have to list every single physical site that is going to be in the assessment, and that can be offices, data centres, development hubs. Each location must be assessed if it contributes into the scope activities. So you have to put the address in there. You can't just say the whole of Germany. You have to put the actual individual sites down. If they're not listed, they're not allowed to actually work on any TISAX work. I found that the hard way with my previous place. The objectives. So you need to select your relevant objectives, and these will give you an insight the levels you're going to go through. And I'm going to literally go through that in a second. Protection needs an assessment level, so that's sensitivity level, the data you handle. The scope name and contacts, so you need to assign a name for your scope, your business name, your name, it doesn't really matter, but just to name it. You also need to provide the contact details for the responsible person managing the whole assessment in your company, who is the main contact. You also need to add on anyone else who needs to have access into the ENX portal. So you might have some other colleagues that need to have access as well. And publication and sharing preferences. So that's when you can choose whether your TISAX label will be public visible or you shared only with selected partners. So either anyone can see it all or they have to request to share with you. This gets complicated this a little bit. These are the TISAX objectives. So when you come to select these, it's these are what you're looking at. So I'm trying to explain this best I can. So the green bit is the information security section. This kind of purpley pinky bit is prototypes, and the sort of bluey bit at the bottom is data protection. So what you're doing is you're reading the statements and you're selecting what applies to you. Obviously work in the areas that you're going to be covering. So if you're just doing information security, just concentrate on here. What you'll need to do then is decide which ones are correct, and then you select the numbers, and whatever the highest number in that section is what you're going to be doing for your TISAX. Now, just to let you know, you notice the word very is highlighted. Now I've highlighted that, it's not highlighted when you select it. It's because very equals level 3. So wherever you see the word very, you can see it here, it's always level 3. I've actually put these on the end, so just take a note of these if you need to, just say which levels they are, because they're not actually listed. But level 1 there is straight away, it's level 1, so it's just high protection, but you get into a little bit more detail, and it's to do with sharing data and availability of data. So you just need to read these statements when you select your objectives, And then that's when you can work out which level you should be doing your TISAX on. Prototypes tend to be a level 3, really. Self-assessment is a real big part of TISAX because all 3 levels do need the self-assessment. And again, based on the VDA questionnaire and Annex A, 27001 Annex A. And then you have your 3 subjects. So information security, which is your core. Again, that is what most people would be taking. And then you've got prototypes protection, and then you've got data protection. So data protection is covered briefly, PII, in 27001. So if you know your numbers, it's 5.3A, 5.34. However, this is a whole big section. There are 12 controls under data protection, so there's a lot more in depth. And then how the self-assessment is used. So it identifies those gaps, so you know what you need to work on. Corrective action, so you know what you need to finish in time with the audit, and also get yourself ready for the audit, because you need to submit that for level 2 and level 3. Self-assessment scoring. Now this is really, really important. So maturity level for your self-assessment is what you'll be selecting against each of the controls. There are 6 levels, so 0 to 5. So 0 is you don't have anything at all whatsoever. Number 5, it's singing, dancing, and has been in there for a long time, and continuous improvement, etc. So high, high, high. You're aiming for a level 3. So you can see my mouse there. So level 3 is the pass rate. The actual number you're looking for is 2.71. So you'll see that in your results tab. So you're trying to get a level 3. Just a little tip from my side is a lot of people think they've got level 3. They've actually got level 2 or maybe even level 1. I'll go into that in a second, but just be aware of what these two mean, just to make sure you put your right level down. So maturity is really, really key in your self-assessment. Then you have the audit itself. So level 1, you don't have an audit, so do not worry. If you do level 2 and level 3, level 2 is remote. So that's when you'll be doing it online. You ought to still do it offline first and then come online with you. Level 3 is on site, and they will review every single control in great depth and do lots and lots of interviews. And then a typical schedule that you do before the audits even start is probably a kick-off meeting, and you'll do some introductions and you'll confirm the scope and go through the process. Your auditor will also discuss with you how to share evidence. So evidence is what you'll need to provide, documents, screenshots, etc., to your auditor. They will have maybe a portal themselves. They might have a way to share that document with them. And then obviously level 3 is the walk around and interviews. And then they will document all the findings, go over the findings, closing meeting, and then write up a report. When it comes to the report, this is kind of the findings that you're looking at. Conformist compliance, so that means you'll instantly have your label straight away, as long as you've got a score 2.71 or above, and those are valid for 3 years. Rooms for improvement, they might ask you to do some work on that as part of a corrective action plan, but that means you are compliant, but there are some extra bits that you can work on, sort of good practices. And again, you might have temporary labels for that, but also when you get your permanent, valid for 3 years. Observation, it means that you are compliant, however they kind of notice that something could be a risk in the future, so it's one to be very aware of. And then minor and major is then when you do have some minors or majors are potential risks or an actual risk itself to your information security. You must do a corrective action plan, and you will not get your labels until that is all completed. Talking about corrective action plan, so this is kind of the process for it. So if you're requested to do this, you have from the audit date, overall you've got 6 months, but you have 2 to 4 weeks to submit to your auditor your plan, and that plan will contain what you're going to be doing, root cause analysis, the timeline that you're going to get everything done by. They will approve it, hopefully, or give you suggestions to change it. And then again, you've still got then up to 6 months from your audit date to complete the corrective actions. If you need more, they can extend it to 9 months, but you must provide justification why. Okay. And then exchange of results. So when you finally got your labels, this is what will happen. First of all, the auditor will publish the report on the ENX portal. Only you will see that report. ENX will add on your labels for you onto the ENX portal. And then that's when you've decided, is it visible for everybody, or are you asking people to exchange? So you can keep it confidential. Okay. Right, so I'm now going to go into my sort of tips for how to complete a TISAX self-assessment. This is what I've learned over doing it myself and also helping clients. The biggest thing that comes out of it is TISAX requires a lot more work and effort than people realise. I've heard many times people say, we've been asked and we want it within 2 weeks, and it's like, it's not going to take 2 weeks, it's going to take longer than 2 weeks. So it really needs to be embedded, especially if you're starting from scratch and you don't have 27,001, so that means you don't have an ISMS. It will take at least 3 months plus, if not 6 months plus. So I've got some tips to go over with you, what I found quite useful. The first thing is the ENX website. On there is where you get your downloads. Now I'm just going to show you one here. You go under the TISAX one to get the downloads, and that will give you the self-assessment. Also, the handbook is under this one. There are some downloads under network, but they're different downloads, so you don't want those ones. This is the version everyone's using at the moment, so it's 6.0.3, no updates since 2024 at the moment. So you download that, and that will be an Excel file. So when you open the Excel file, lots of tabs along the bottom, lots of great information. This self-assessment is really, really good. There's real good information in there. Again, go and review the maturity levels. So this is where there's actually more information than what I've got here. You're looking for level 3. A lot of people think they've got level 3 and they've only got level 2. The differences are level 2 is you may have finished all your documents, they've been published, people have been trained on them, but it's only just been followed recently. Whereas maturity level 3, it's been published and released for some time. So that's why we always say about a minimum of 3 months. That 3 months just means it's been embedded into your company, into the workflows. You can actually prove to the auditor that people have been trained, and you've done maybe some KPIs, maybe some reviews. Level 3 just means it's working, and you've sorted out any of the issues you may have had if you've only just released it under level 2. My recommendation is, if you're unsure, put level 2, because if you put level 3, you'll forget about it because you think, oh, we're compliant. But if you put level 2, it just means that you will have to go back to it and relook at it. So I always recommend, if you do not quite sure, go lower, because you can always increase the number. So when you go to look at your categories, so whether that is information security, prototype, or data protection, when you go under the tabs, they look exactly the same at the top. If you go right to the top under D, column D, you'll see a plus button. Press that and it'll expand it out. A lot of people forget, oh, don't know that's there. So do expand that out. So D is where you'll add your maturity level. E is where you will add a summary of what you have in place. So just some words or some sentences of what we have in place. Don't need War and Peace, just something nice and simple. F is where you will list all of the documents and evidence that you're going to be providing to your auditor. They will look at that list. They will expect to see those documents. Anything that can prove that you are compliant to that control. G is where you keep it blank for the auditor. However, I personally use it for planning. So I actually use that column to write my notes in, you know, what needs to be done, what's left, or who I need to chase, etc. And then you just clear it off when you're ready to send it to the auditor. And this is just an example of what it could look like. So this is one filled out. So we think we're a level 3. We've just put a little statement in there to say this is for 1.1.1, by the way. So this is the security policies. So we've actually got an information security policy for this example. We've just put a little text in there, nothing too major. We've put down the evidence. You may have more evidence. So you may have training records, you may have management reviews, you may have KPI results. You could have more in here. And again, you keep that blank, but you could just use that for your working out. That's what I normally do. So they're the main tips. And I'm just going to show you some just small little bits. So must and shoulds. So as you go through the Excel sheet, all the columns are full of lots of data. So the must and the should have to be done. I thought that the should is ideally done, but really and truly they should be done. If you can't get the should, some of the shoulds done, you have to give a really good justification. But the musts obviously have to be there. So just go through each of these. You'll get different lines all the way down, and then just see that you've got them all there. So really try and get both of those done if you can. If not, should is the only one you'd probably be a little bit less on, but just give justification. As you go across the columns a little bit more, there is also lots and lots of information. So you get obviously your objectives, and you'll get lots of information that will help you. If you're doing level 1 and level 2, review all the columns, but do not worry about M and Z. But if you're doing level 3, M and Z you have to cover, because that is the very. So that's that word. When you see the word very, it comes up often. It means level 3. So just remember, M and Z are just for level 3 only, and level 3 is all of them, including M and Z. And then when you've completed your self-assessment, if you go to results tab, this is where you will find your results. So in this case, we've passed, because 2.75 is a pass rate. Pass rate is 2.71. There's some calculations that are done in the background that I don't know anything about. Do not delete any of your rows in your self-assessment, anything at all. You can hide, but do not delete, because that will affect this. So this also gives you a massive big long list of a breakdown of all of the controls and where you sit, and it's really good, actually, this results tab. So these are the next ones that I want to give you, just some small little tips. So when you fill out your self-assessment, I would say, first of all, be brutally honest. Again, maturity level, put a lower level if you're not sure, because you will definitely come back to it and review it. If you put level 3 or above, you will just glide over it. Yeah, don't pretend you have something that you don't have. Introduce yourself. So on this, I would say, the auditor probably may not know you or know much about your company, so avoid the internal jargon. So make sure everything is clearly labelled or spelt out, etc. Provide evidence as you go. So I highly recommend this. When you're doing your self-assessment, consider your evidence as you go and try and pull things in to store somewhere, whether it's copies or whatever you need to do. It's so much easier to do that as you go rather than everything all at the end. Just keep that going. That's really good practice. Use real examples. So when you're describing the process, sort of talk about how they work in practice. So rather than theory, they would like to see things in practice if possible. Make sure you cross-check with the ISA catalogue. So make sure you're covering all of the controls. Make sure you're reading all of the notes there. As I say, the self-assessment that TISAX provide is really good. It's got lots of information. So make sure everything is covered. Avoid copy-paste answers. So you may have this similar controls, but just make sure they are unique and they have been you filled them out uniquely rather than just trying to be generic. Show continuous improvement. So you may get to a point where there's something just not released already yet. As I say, pass rate is 2.71, so it won't be, you might have things not ideally all 3 or above. If something's in process, just explain what you've done, what's left to do, when it'll be completed, a real good plan. They like to see that. Check consistency across the controls, so just make sure that you're not contradicting yourself. So just check each one, make sure you've got the right information. Peer review, so this is where it's ideal to have fresh pair of eyes who can have a little look over that. So internal audits, someone else in the business, just check everything over and to check, because you'll be working on this quite a lot. So yeah, it's really good to have some fresh eyes, and keep it concise. So as I mentioned, no war and peace. We don't need anything like that. Just really clear and easy, and so auditor doesn't have mountains to read. So last thing I'm going to go over is just some common questions that have come up that I've experienced. So here's one where tier 1 customers pushing for us to achieve TISAX within 6 months. Is that timeline realistic, and what should we prioritizing first? So 6 months is doable again, but if you have 27,001, it depends, because you're already halfway there or more than halfway there. If you're level 3, then you would need a bit more time than 6 months. It also depends on your self-assessment results. So if you're finding that you've got more 1s and 2s rather than 3s, you'll need to work on remediation of those gaps. Also, what resources do you have? So if you've got one person working on it for a couple of hours once a week, then it's going to take a lot longer than 6 months. You'll need to dedicate resources to complete this. Prioritize your self-assessment. So download that self-assessment straight away, even before you filled out the scope or registered. Start on that self-assessment as soon as you can, because then you'll know exactly where the gaps are and how long it is. So 6 months possible, just depending on the different criterias. Our client has just told us we need TISAX label AL2, so level 2. What does that actually mean in practice, and how does it differ from level 1? So level 2 is a self-assessment and remote audit, and that's the permanent labels that you will receive, whereas level 1 is just a self-assessment only, so no labels are issued. Again, not many people accept self-assessment because it hasn't been independently reviewed with an auditor. So that's the difference. And then level 3 is higher up because it is the actual in-person on-site audit. Cyber Essentials Plus. If people have Cyber Essentials Plus, how much of that work carries over into TISAX? Where are the gaps? So Cyber Essential Plus gives you a good baseline, especially around the technical IT hygiene, but TISAX is far broader and deeper. So TISAX is really, really good, but you do have the gaps, especially in risk management, physical security, supplier control is really big in TISAX. It goes a lot deeper, even more than 27,001. And then you've got prototypes, so you might have prototype you need to cover. So it's a good baseline to get you started, but TISAX will build on much, much more. What are the common reasons companies fail their TISAX audit on the first attempt? So there are lots of reasons why people may fail. Lots of it's to do with incomplete or poor documentation. They're saying something that they don't have or haven't done. Definitely the incorrect maturity levels. So again, really check your level 2 versus level 3. Employee security awareness gaps, and make sure your employees are aware of TISAX and what they need to do, because there will be interviews. And also underestimating the resources needed. So that's time, people, budget. This does need a lot of work. It's not a 2-week job. It's quite a lot. So I think I'm handing back over to Carly if she's available, just to talk about Blackmores.
Thank you, Emma. Really appreciate all of that really good information. So how can we help? Obviously, we're implementing TISAX as a service, so as a full project delivery, we're happy to do that. We're happy to help you with your self-assessment, internal audits, or readiness for the external assessment itself. So, yes, just thank you once again, Emma, for leading us through all of that.